chapter 24. Proverbs chapter 24. Stand with me if you would. I'm going to begin reading in verse number 30. Verse number 30. And again, I'm grateful that you're here tonight. Proverbs chapter, pardon me, I said 24, 25. No, I was right, 24. I'm getting confused. My eyes are, I'm trying to adjust here. Proverbs chapter 24, and this time I really mean it. Verse 30, and we begin reading. I went by the field of the slothful, that's the lazy, by the vineyard of the man void of understanding. And lo, it was grown over with thorns and nettles, that's briars, and nettles had covered the face thereof, and the stone wall thereof was broken down. Then I saw and considered. He says, then I saw and considered it well. So I stood there and I thought about this for a minute. I looked upon it and received instruction. Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep, so shall thy poverty come. As one that travaileth, that means he's screaming in pain. And thy want as an armed man. We'll leave off reading there. Father, I pray you'd bless the reading of your word. I pray you would use it to speak to hearts tonight, and I pray these things in thy name. Amen. Thank you. You may be seated. How in the world did I get in to this mess that I'm in? I remember being asked that question by someone whose life was almost in total ruin. How did I get myself into this mess that I'm in? I sat talking to a man on the phone whose marriage had fallen apart, and his wife had left him. And he asked the question, how did I get here? I've spoken to women at domestic disturbances that ask the same question. And honestly, when you're at the point that you're asking, how did I get here? There is a good side to that, and I'll get to that by the end of the message. The answer to that is the title of my message, Little by Little. That's the title of my message. How did I get into this mess that I'm in? Well, little by little, by little, by little. I started to entitle it One Step Leads to Another, but I wasn't ready to preach all those steps tonight. First off, let's look at our text, and I want to observe some things. Solomon says, I went down to the field of the slothful, went down to his vineyard. Now, you understand, a vineyard usually has a wall around it to protect it from thieves, to protect it from predators, to protect the vine, because this is their livelihood. This is how they survive. This is how they make a living. I went down to the field of the slothful, and by the vineyard of the man void of understanding. So we learned two things about this guy here. Number one, we learned that he's lazy. And you know, there are more ways to be lazy other than to be lazy in our actions. You can be lazy in your actions. You can also be lazy in your attitude. You can also be lazy in your spirit. I'll say more about that. But I looked at his field. I looked at what he produced. Didn't look at his personality. Didn't look at his attitude. Didn't look at his mentality. Didn't look at his excuses. I looked at his field. I looked at what he produced. What is the result? And he says, I observed and I learned from it. And then he looks at it and you understand, he says here, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall thy poverty come. That word poverty doesn't just mean you're broke. It means poverty, but it means distress. It means hopelessness. It means a condition of despair. This man is broke, this man is bankrupt, and there doesn't appear to be a solution to his situation. How did he get there? Solomon says he got there little by little. He got there a little bit at a time. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. I was talking about how we treat our visitors. And by the way, I've never had a visitor come to this church and say they were treated poorly, ever. I will say that. I had visitors leave because I had posted a letter of a missionary who was a missionary to China, a young lady who was working as a student missionary in China. And a woman saw that and chided me about supporting the Communist Party. I'm not really sure how I was supporting the Communist Party by talking about my friend Laurel, who was a teacher in China back when they were allowing Americans to teach English in China. But somehow or another, pardon me, somehow or another that translated into I supported the Communist Party. But I got to talking to her, and I figured out that there were several aspects of that elevator that were not hitting the top floor. But I've never had anybody say that they'd been treated poorly or that the church was unfriendly, anything like that. I was thinking about a story I heard about a young man, teenager. His name was Lee. And Lee was, he was kind of on his own. He didn't have much of a, pardon me, didn't have much of a good upbringing. And he decided one day he was going to check God out. He went to a church. And he was ignored by most of the congregation. And when he spoke to the pastor pretty much just blew him off. Didn't say terrible things to him. But in that one passing conversation, one little conversation, that young man got the message that God's man, and by default, God's people, are not the least bit interested in you. Later that very week, somebody, I've heard this story in two different ways. He found it on the pavement. Somebody handed it to him while he was out walking. At some point, somebody handed him a brochure. And he opened it up, and it was a brochure on the merits of communism. And it talked all about how horrible America was and how America was anti-this and anti-that and, you know, built on slavery and all this business, you know. This was in the late 50s. He ended up joining the Marine Corps, of all things. Did not have a good record in the military, got out. And it only made his hatred for the country grow more and more, to the point to where he wanted to go to Russia and defect. He didn't go to Russia and defect, but he did meet a very beautiful Russian girl named Marina over there, and he married her. They came back to the United States, and his hatred for this country began to boil over to the point to where one day in Dallas, Texas, in November of 1963, he made his way. He made his way to the top, to the sixth floor of the Texas School Book Depository, big building where they stored all the school books when they weren't being used. And got himself a job there, and on a certain day made his way up to the top floor of that and took a rifle and leaned out that window and fired 3 shots at the parade below, killing the President of the United States. I say, how can you make a connection between one man and his one pastor or one Christian being cold to this man? He didn't go out the next day and kill the president. But I'll tell you what he did. One little step here, one little step, and one little step, and one little step led to that point. Last week, a friend of mine, her son, who is in his early 40s, died of an overdose. He had been in and out of drugs for years, and he got clean for quite a while, and then he decided he was going to have one last fling. And what happens to the body when you use drugs and you get clean, what happens is your body, when you get clean, your body is compromised to the tolerance of that drug. And so he went back, he took one more hit, and he overdosed. He used meth one time, after being clean for a couple of years, and his body couldn't take it, and he overdosed and he died. That young man did not one day decide that he was going to overdose on drugs. That man did not decide at one day he decided to use drugs, and the next day his life was destroyed. No, it was one step at a time. One step at a time. I knew a girl named Cindy. I preached her funeral. She was 33 years old. Her 12-year-old daughter sang Amazing Grace at the funeral. That daughter is now 35, 36, married, and has a child of her own, and has a wonderful life, and is faithfully going to church and loves the Lord. And her grandparents raised her, and they were great, wonderful people. Cindy died of she had acute liver failure and hepatitis B, among other things. And I was a young pastor. I was probably 40. I might have been 30. I might have been close to 40 at the time. And I was her parents' pastor. And I went to the hospital. I got called to the hospital. It's 11:30 at night. And I go to the hospital. I walk in, and her parents are standing there. Her two brothers are standing there all around the bed. And I came in, and I tried to get her attention, and she was barely awake. And it was a little after 10 o'clock, and she was barely awake and just gasping for breath, just real shallow breathing, just kind of every once in a while, you know, what they call death, death breath, where the body just tries to keep jump starting itself. And I said, Cindy, can you hear me? She said, yeah, Pastor. I said, Cindy, I don't have to tell you what's happening here. I said, I want to know that you're right with God. I want to know that you have settled the question about your salvation. And she looked up at me very sincerely, in a lot of pain, and said, I did that when I was 9. Huh. And then she closed her eyes, and I could tell she kind of relaxed. Can a Christian get to that place in their life? I believe they can. So, can a Christian live that way? Yes, but not for long. Remember, she's 33 years old. And as she lay there in the bed and I watched her, she tensed up, head rolled back, and I could hear that gurgled breath that she had. And the blood started coming out her nose, her nostrils. She started bleeding out her nostrils, and she took a breath, and her skin went from that yellowish, jaundiced color to a pale white. And I watched her settle back into that pillow and open her mouth, and I watched her take her last breath. And the nurse standing there looked at her, looked at the parents, and said, she's gone. I'd never watched anybody die before. I've seen dead people. I've seen people that had been killed, and I've seen suicide things, but I'd never watched anybody die before. That's the first time that ever happened. Unfortunately, not the last time I ever watched anybody die, but it was the first time. And I didn't sleep much that night. Later on, I found out I chatted with her mother and with her daughter. And she 2 weeks before she had died, she took her little daughter aside and she said, I want to tell you a story. And she took her through, and I won't go through all of them, but she took her through. She said, and she told her daughter straight up, I'm going to die. I'm not going to live. I've got days to live. And I want you to hear what I have to say. And she went through step by step by step how she got from being a little girl in a Christian school to being a teenager who went into rebellion. She said the very first thing was she got a job outside. She got a job at Wendy's and became very first thing was she made new friends on the job. Older friends. Friends who made available to her things like cigarettes. And from there, marijuana. I will go to my grave knowing, and the more I have learned and the more I have seen, I know that tobacco is a gateway drug. Marijuana is a gateway drug. And marijuana, the THC levels in marijuana today are 13 times higher than they were when I was in high school. And I grew up in the roaring 60s and 70s when, it was all peace, love, and sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It was the associations and the introductions of cigarettes, and then marijuana, and then alcohol. And then that didn't do it but that led to the illicit sex as a teenager. And that led to the drugs, because she got in with the drug crowd. And step by step by step by step, one step at a time. See, she didn't go drink a glass of beer and die the next day. It was a long road to get to that point. The Bible says a little sleep, a little slumber, a little bit of letting your guard down, a little bit of what we allow. The Bible says, happy is the man, blessed is the man who condemneth not himself in the thing which he alloweth. What is the step that I'm going to allow that's going to lead me to a place of destruction? We look at this man, his livelihood is destroyed. It's all grown over with thorns and nettles. Now, he didn't plant thorns and nettles there. He just didn't take care to remove them. He didn't tear his walls down. He just didn't take care to keep them up. Let me tell you something. When I get up here and preach against things that seem like they might be not that bad, yeah, well, it's a little thing. I was talking to somebody about certain things that I had listened to. How many of you know who C.S. Lewis is? I was listening to C.S. Lewis this week. I was listening to a recording of a book written by C.S. Lewis. I wouldn't listen to C.S. Lewis. He's dead. But I was talking to him on a Ouija board. No, I was listening to a message by C.S. Lewis. It was talking about satanic things we allow in our household. And there is a spiritist revival in America right now, more so than it's ever been. And I don't mean spiritual, I mean spiritist, as in dealing with familiar spirits. Dream catchers, sage burning, everybody's we're going to burn sage in my house and purify it. Well, no, first off, you're going to make your house stink when you do that, number one. and it's hard to get that out of the carpet. But number two, that is something that is directly out of demonic practices. You know, dream catchers, Ouija boards, horoscopes. I had a Christian, somebody who claimed to be a born-again Christian, talking to me about, I made some comment, and she said, and knowing when I was born, she said, "Oh, well, I would expect you to have that attitude because you're a Sagittarius." I said, "I'm a what?" She said, and I knew what she meant. I was playing dumb. She said, "Are you a Sagittarius?" I said, "No, I'm a Baptist." I'm a Baptist. No, I'm not a Sagittarius. I don't practice star worship. And as one speaker I heard say, you know, it's really kind of ridiculous. You look up in the stars and you see these stars. By the way, has anybody seen that the planets are aligned right now? You know what that means? That means they're all at the same angle. That's what it means. But right now it's been cloudy and we haven't been able to see it. But if the sky is real clear, and right after the moon comes up, we can see right now. You can see what they're calling the parade of planets. You can see the moon, and you can see, it's not a moon, but you can see it. You can see Venus, and you can see Jupiter, and you can see Saturn, and Mars. Big red ball in the sky. You'll actually see them because they're all lined up. And now, of course, they're not really lined up. They're billions of miles away from one another. And I think it's a pretty narcissistic thing, these people who look at their horoscopes, to think that, you know, that star out there, the light from that star took 75 years to get here. You know, and it's out there millions of miles away, and somehow or another, because of the position of that star that's a million miles away, I shouldn't drink milk tomorrow afternoon. I mean, how self-centered can you be? But astrology goes all the way back to the time of Nimrod. It's an old religion. And we dabble in that, and people get messed up. You see, what ends up happening is what we allow, the little steps, the little sin. You know, let me give you a few things before I get lost in my illustration here. I don't want to lose my point in the illustration. You know, most people that go bankrupt over credit card debt, and I mean, people, I knew a guy that had to drop out of Bible college, his sophomore year in Bible college, because in 2 years in college, he'd been in college for 2 years, and in 2 years, he had acquired 27, now this was in 1980. This was not recently, 1980. He had acquired over $27,000 in credit card debt. He was bankrupt. He'd never pay that. He could never pay that. It was still, he's probably, that's 40 years ago. He's probably still paying for it. Yeah, he didn't buy anything big. It's just that he bought everything. I mean, it was nickel and dime. It was a meal here, a brand new suit here and there, you know, $100 here, $50 there before, you know, and then, oh, well, this one, oh, you've got that credit card? Well, then because you have that one, we'll give you our credit card. You want to know how you can tell if a company, a retail business is in trouble? They start putting out their own credit card. Watch it. Watch that. When you knew that Sears was in trouble when you could get a Sears credit card. That is strict. I'm not talking about MasterCard, Visa, Bank of America card, whatever. But when you could get, when you could start getting I'll use one of the, you know, when Payless Shoe Source offers you their own credit card, they're in financial trouble because they're looking for an opportunity to get somebody to borrow money to buy stuff from them. I know of a ministry that got ruined because the head of that ministry was in financial trouble, the ministry was, and he compelled, didn't order them to do it, but he compelled staff members to borrow money to pay operating expenses of the ministry. I've known of pastors that said, I'll tell you something, Phil, if I ever come to you and ask you to take a personal loan to pay operating expenses for the church, fire me, because I've messed up really, really bad. By the way, we're in really good shape financially. Church, less than just right close to the neighborhood, a little under. We're a little short of $70,000 debt on a $1.4 million building. All the bills are paid. There's money in the bank. We're good. Just put that. We've got an expense coming up in the spring for all of this not landscape, but all of this dirt that we had to put around the parking lot. And he's going to seed that to bolster that part, whatever you call that. I forget what the word I'm looking for. But all that work, all that dirt work out there is going to cost us $6,000. You know where we're going to get it? We already have it. It's in savings. So don't worry about it. But if you get to that point to where you're borrowing money to pay debt, you're in trouble. Like America is doing. Little by little, little debt leads to bankruptcy. Little sins lead to disaster. I know very few men who have destroyed their marriage because one day they looked at one dirty picture. One day they got a little too friendly in a conversation with a woman, and they were alone with her. But step by step by step by step by step. I don't have conversations with, my wife has access to all my text messages. Well, doesn't she trust you? I don't trust me. Why? Because I'm still in unregenerate, dying, sinful flesh. That's why. It's not because I'm evil. It's because I'm smart. Billy Graham, there was a real problem among evangelists in the Southern Baptist Convention, and Billy Graham and Cliff Barrows and a couple of other guys met in a restaurant. They met in a hotel in Sacramento, and they put together an accord. And they said, this is the type of ethical, moral, legal, financial behavior that we should expect out of an evangelist. And if they won't, anybody who says they're an evangelist and they don't adhere to this standard, we're not going to endorse them. We're not going to recommend that they be used. If they won't sign off on this, well, and by the way, it was good stuff. He understood that one little compromise leads to another little compromise. One little sin leads to another little sin. You know what? Hey, young people, I'll tell you something. What you get caught doing is not the thing that's going to destroy you. It's the one you get away with. I've heard pastors and I've heard parents say this. You may think you're getting away with it. You're not. I'll know. I'll catch it. I'm not going to catch everything my kids do. I might. Some of that you might get away with. And that'll be the one that destroys you. Because the one you get away with, the sin you get away with, the step that you get away with, the compromise that you get away with is the one that will give you the liberty to take the next step, and then the next one, and then the next one. Until you are, as the man over in Ecclesiastes, it says, we are holden in the cords of our own sin. And one little thread at a time, we find ourselves bound in chains. One little sin leads to a bigger sin that leads to a bigger sin that leads to disaster. It's the little bit of sleep that leads to poverty. See, we're talking about results here. Because a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, a little bit there, and you're snared. You're caught. And before you know it, you will have no idea how you got to where you are. You'll just figure out where you are. The dangerous sin is the one you get away with. When David stayed home from the war, he got away with it. And that was his downfall. When David was up on the roof, instead of out in the tents with his army, he got away with it. That was his downfall. When David looked out over the roof line there, and I'm sure his palace was much taller than the rest of the houses around it, and he looks down there and you understand the way houses were built back then. The living room was the roof. And they went up on the roof. That was their private, relax, hang out, watch television, play video games. That's where they did that, up on the roof. They don't watch television and play video. I was just seeing if you was listening. But that's where they relaxed. That's where they slept. That's where they bathed. And he gets up there and he sees this beautiful woman taking a bath. I can't prove this. I can't prove this. And I'm not trying to add to the Bible. Not at all. But I wonder if that was the first time he saw her. I wonder. You see, she was fair to look upon. Oh, that's not where he fell. He looked at her and he got away with it. He arranged to meet her and got away with it. He had sex with her. He got away with it. It seemed. Then she got pregnant. Oh, that's a whole nother problem to deal with. And then he tried to cover that up. That didn't work. And ultimately, he led a man to his death and took that woman as his wife to cover up what he had done. Now he was in a mess. And it wasn't long before Nathan, the prophet, was pointing at him and saying, "Thou art the one. You shamed the nation of Israel before your enemies. You shamed the God of Israel before your enemies and before your neighbors. And you destroyed the reputation of the throne. And you're going to pay for it." And he did. He did. Fourfold. The baby that came as a result of that died. he saw his son rape his half-sister Tamar. Tamar's brother Absalom murdered Amnon for what he did. And then Absalom raised up a coup and tried to throw him off the throne. And then Absalom, his son, ended up murdered by David's own general. Oh, David paid. Here's what I want you to do. When the temptation of the sin comes, I want you to see its logical end. Bob Lilly is a former Dallas Cowboy, former player with the Dallas Cowboys, and he's in the Football Hall of Fame. After he retired from football, he bought into a Coors beer distributorship. And Bob Lilly was a big old guy, and he was a great football player and good businessman, and he bought into this. One night on the way home, he's driving home, and there is a multiple car collision ahead of him. And as he pulls over to see if he might be able to assist, emergency responders were not on the scene as of yet, but this was a disastrous wreck. There were bodies in the road. Cars had been smashed and knocked over and destroyed and were on fire, and people had died in that collision. It was a horrible, bloody mess that Bob Lilly walked up to. And he sees one of the drivers whose car is about halfway into the rail. And he walks over to see if he hears this man groaning with pain. The man is bloody all over. And he goes over there to see if he can help the man. And he talks to him. Is there anything? Can I help you? Are you okay? Where are you hurt? Somebody, the police will be here, the ambulance will be here soon. He tries to talk to the guy and encourage him, and he opens the door of the car to get to the man, and he smells the beer on his breath. And as he opens the car door, a Coors beer can falls out and spills all over Bob Lilly's shoes. A Coors beer can. And he looked back at that wreck and thought to himself, I had a part in this. I sold that to this man. And this is what this is, as one man put it, the end result of the brewer's art. He sold out. He got out of the beer business after that. He couldn't, it disturbed him too much to see people's lives destroyed and to see dead people splattered all over the street as a result of someone consuming his product. You have to ask yourself, what's the end result of this decision? Where is this decision going to take me? The man who has the opportunity to come to Christ, the man who has the opportunity to get right with God and says, no, I'm gonna wait. I'll wait until I'm finished sowing my wild oats. I'll wait until I'm finished with my good time. I'll wait till the party's over and then I'll get right with God. And the 19-year-old young man who said that, who never made it to 21 and never had the opportunity again. Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. What decisions are you making right now that are going to lead to other decisions that'll lead to other decisions, that'll lead to other decisions, that'll lead to poverty. Poverty come as one that travaileth. That means he's screaming in pain. And thy want as an armed man. An armed man is that word literally means a man with a shield. It's a man who finds himself in battle unarmed. Little by little, let's make every little decision the right one. If you make good little decisions, I told my son when he got married, I said, you take care of the moments and the years will take care of themselves. You take care of the days and the years will take care of themselves. You make the right decision today. You make the right decision. You decide, I'm not going to go down that road. I'm not going to pick up that magazine. I'm not going to watch that show. I'm not going to pick up that drink. I'm not going to get involved with that I'm not going to make that friendship. I'm not going to take that job. Ask yourself the question, is this going to draw me closer to God or closer to destruction? Because that really is the two options. I got to quit. Let's all stand. Heads bowed and eyes closed. Say, Pastor, God spoke to my heart through the message today. Pray for me. Slip your hands up. Heads bowed and eyes closed. No one looking around. Thank you. Thank you. I see you.